and welcome to this exciting episode of Teachtact Education Policy Research. Teachtact Education Policy Research is an initiative where we have private interviews with different stakeholders in the education sector around the world and get their opinions on necessary policies needed to boost the education sector of different countries, especially Sub-Saharan African countries. My name is Yetunde Olasoji. I'm the head of training at Teachtact, and I'm glad to be your host. Joining me today is Mr. Jaspal Sidhu, a phenomenal educator whose passion for quality education and collaboration is second to none. Thank you for joining us, and it's a huge honor to have you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jaspal Sidhu, a Singaporean, is the founder and chairman of the SIS Group of Schools. The SIS Group is Indonesia's largest chain of quality private K-12 schools with tuition fees at multiple price points. The group also has schools in Myanmar, India, and South Korea. SIS is currently in a strategic partnership with the International Finance Corporation, World Bank, to expand its operations both in Indonesia and other countries. In 2019, the SIS Group of Schools was awarded the Financial Times IFC World Bank Global Education Award for its transformational work in education across geographies. Jaspal graduated from the National University of Singapore with a degree in civil and structural engineering. He obtained a master's in business administration, distinction from the University of Perth. He is also Indonesia's 3-time amateur stand-up comedian champion. Jaspal speaks openly in international education conferences across the globe, from Cape Town, Dubai, Hong Kong to Singapore. These include conferences organized by impact investors, private equity companies, school organizations, and the IFC World Bank. Thank you again, Mr. Jaspal, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a real privilege for me to be really part of this exciting initiative by Teachtact. It's such a great initiative, such a great, just wonderful for me to see such groups making a difference. So thank you, and a warm hello from Singapore.
Thank you again. Thank you. So I'll just go straight to the questions. So what do you say have been your personal goals and intended contributions so far that have made an impact in the education sector, in your immediate environment, and also the world at large?
Well, thank you. Let me first set the scene so you understand why these are my personal goals. I'm a Singaporean engineer who has worked throughout the 4th largest country in the world, Indonesia. A wonderful country with warm and passionate people with so much of talent, just like what I see in Africa. I left the construction and mining industry to focus on my passion, education. I'm a son of a very humble doorman who stood in the front of the bank just opening doors from Singapore. I was very determined to bring the price of quality education systematically down without affecting student outcomes. I was determined to find that recipe, that secret code, which is scalable. But let me share with you a little bit of my environment, and maybe you can then compare and draw similarities with countries in Africa. Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. And I believe Nigeria is probably the largest economy in Africa, if I'm not wrong. It's taken over South Africa. Like many countries in Africa, social media usage is very high in Indonesia. There's a growing aspirational class. But it has a very weak education system. In fact, Indonesia has been stuck at the bottom 1/5 in the OECD's ranking of education systems through their PISA, P-I-S-A test, Program for International Student Assessment. Yet in this environment, Ms. Chetunde, I had the privilege, the son of a doorman, had the privilege to send my children to a very expensive international school where we paid US $25,000 per year, per child, which I didn't pay, my company paid. They were very generous. Great facilities, great teachers. But you know, think about it, only one group in society can afford that. So I used these best practices in that school and embarked on what I called a half fee project. Basically, each time I established a private school in Indonesia, I will just half the annual fee and then create this ecosystem, or what I call vertical collaboration, where all the schools collaborate up and down this tuition fee ladder. Now, through that ecosystem, I brought the annual fees down from $25,000 a year to US $15,000 a year, and then I established a school. And then I said, no, that's too expensive. I halved that to $8,000 a year, and I established many schools. But I looked at that school and I said, that's still expensive. And then I halved that to $4,000 a year, and I established a few schools. And then I looked at that school and I said, that's still expensive. So I halved that to only $2,000 a year 3 years ago, very systematically, very carefully. I'm not an NGO. So I want you to know, every school is almost full. Everyone is profitable and scalable. My parents, my students, my teachers are happy. My investors are happy. We have students going to universities like Oxford, Imperial College, National University of Singapore, UCLA, and other top universities. Today, we are expanding in Indonesia, in India, in Myanmar, and other parts of Southeast Asia, and very soon to Africa, if I can get the right partners, people with the same passion. My partnership with the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank in my expansion plan has been a great partnership. And all these under the brand Singapore International School. Now, if you ask me why Singapore, because I'm from there and I'm pretty plugged into the world's best education system as ranked by OECD's PISA. Because Singapore has no resources. We have no agricultural resources. We have no mining. We invest in our people, in education. Where R&D in education, it's outstanding. Now, last year, and thank you, you mentioned that. I'll mention it again. We were awarded the Financial Times World Bank Award for Transformational Work, IFC Award, for what we are doing in the education sector. Now that I've understood the intricacies of creating some of my life to grow these 2,000 a year schools, and then I'm going to half it to only $1,000, and then half it to 500. And I tell you, they will all be profitable and scalable. Now, how is it? How is it? I bet everyone is wondering. I bet you are wondering, how is it I can take the fees down and maintain quality? Well, when you reduce fees, two things happen. One, infrastructure costs reduce. Two, teacher costs must also reduce. Just let me talk a little bit about teachers, which I think is a more important issue. To reduce teacher costs, you need to hire from local communities. And therein, Yetunde, lies the problem. These teachers may not have the experience, the exposure. Those schools at the bottom of the tuition fee pyramid suffer from what I call pedagogical isolation. That includes public schools. Who can they collaborate? Who can these schools at the bottom of the pyramid collaborate with the same kind of school? So what do you get? Flat and horizontal collaboration with the same dull ideas just floating around. So this award-winning ecosystem of collaboration up and down the tuition fee ladder is the main reason we are doing well. And so when we do these schools in Africa one day, those teachers and parents will be collaborating with students and teachers in Myanmar and India and rest of the world. So that's the background. So to your question, what are my personal goals? I have 5. 1, to ensure that wherever I am, I form a symbiotic relationship with the local government and create meaningful public-private partnership with transparent data so that we can all measure and measure the impact. Number 2, to ensure that any school I establish is scalable and sustainable. Number 3, to keep focusing on our school program as we are doing, ensuring it's relevant, preparing our children for this very unpredictable world. And here are my links in Singapore, where I'm plugged in a country that spends not millions, but billions on R&D in education has been very useful. Number 4, to find better ways to identify passionate individuals right from the universities or even in the sector and train them to be better teachers through this ecosystem of collaboration. I should let you know I'm working with Deloitte right now to find innovative ways to train teachers, looking for ideas outside the education industry. How does Google train? How does Google recruit? How does Apple train? How does Marriott train? Here, I want to say outright that the education system is broken. We need to find solutions from outside the industry. And 5, finally, my personal goal is to share what I've learned transparently and learn from groups like yourself. And that is why I don't hesitate. When you reached out to me and say, can you share? I don't hesitate to join webinars like this. Don't hesitate to speak in conferences in Cape Town or San Francisco, Dubai, because this is education. You and I cannot collaborate. We are hurting ourselves every day. Thank you.
Wow, Mr. Jasper, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This your personal goal has actually, it's like a huge policy on its own. And I must comment that. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So that will take me to my next question. All right, thank you. It'll take me to my next question. So in light of COVID-19, what do you think national education policies, especially for developing countries, should focus on at this time?
So you know, during this lockdown, or in Singapore, we call it circuit breaker, I had this opportunity to Zoom with more than 200 educators, principals, investors, funders, government officials, and edtech companies. And you know, one very common interesting input that I heard over and over and over again was this. There was a struggle to balance the use of technology with the abilities of teachers and their state of well-being. So let me explain. There's enough of technology today for you to choose. In fact, someone like me, I'm inundated by technology offered by edtech companies, and I'm sure even public schools, because this is a time for them to really sell themselves. But what this pandemic has taught me is this. Technology is not 100% replacement for K-12 classroom teaching. Our children need interaction, they need socialization, they need to go back to schools. Number 2, unprepared or untrained teachers will struggle using any kind of technology. And number 3, training won't make any difference if your teachers are stressed. So we all need to focus on the teacher. Now, before the pandemic, what were teachers doing? So much of unrelated work, so much of unnecessary work, communicating with parents, interacting with difficult parents, reports, attending meetings, doing administration work, organizing sports events, doing remedials, babysitting, standing at doors and smiling to welcome students and parents because people want enrollment, chasing parents to even pay school fees. almost everything that I think a spouse does at home except for cook and wash. And I bet some of them are doing too. And you want them to improve student outcomes? And that was before the pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, they're asked to go online so abruptly with technology that they're not familiar with. And we say, please run a class with maybe 30, 40 faces staring at them in front of a 13-inch, 14-inch screen while handling their own anxiety around this pandemic. Yet only there are teachers who are so stressed because their father, their grandfather had died of COVID-19. Their husbands, their wives, their sons, and their daughters have lost jobs. Cabin fever, stress. And we want them to improve student outcomes. Every theory and science tells you that a stressed individual will underperform. And I tell you this, things are not going to improve. It never has, and it never will, if we ignore the teacher. And I'm telling you, any government policy in education needs to focus on the educator and the teacher. Free them from bureaucracy, free them from this mundane tasks. A lot of what I said can be replaced by technology. Get the teacher back into classroom. Train the teacher with soft skills, collaboration, communication for that individual to make that connection with the students, to act as a mentor, a facilitator, a friend, a philosopher to these young minds. Use technology to complement a more competence-based program. So, you know, I told you, I look at outside the industry. So I've been looking at companies like Starbucks and Marriott, and I know that they're spending a lot of time and money on trying to understand human behavior. And they had they all have award-winning HR systems that look at the well-being of staff. Now, Marriott came up with an award-winning approach to improve employee well-being through a very clever certification system. And by the way, that approach is available to organizations, and I'm here even schools. So let me ask you and all your listeners this question, and I've asked this in conferences. If employees of Starbucks handle one customer at a time, if employees of Marriott handle one customer at a time, and they're leading the charge in the well-being of the employees, why in God's name are we letting teachers who handle 30 customers, students, 40 students at a time, why are we ignoring their well-being? So don't let all these initiatives distract you. Focus on the teacher. You get that right, it'll be easier to tackle. And post-COVID-19, things are not going to get easy. They're going to get more complicated. The world is vulnerable. It's unpredictable. And our young need new skills to get them into the workforce. And here's the irony. Here's the irony. Think about it. We are asking someone who has never worked in the private sector to teach our children to be ready for the private sector. So that is what I mean. Get back to the teacher and look at solutions. I'm not here to complain. I'm not here to give you, I told you I don't like philosophical discussions. Solutions. 1, use technology to take away the mundane tasks of teachers. 2, train teachers with soft skills to make that connection with the child. 3, think about it, yeah? We look at giving students attachments to the private sector. How about giving teachers attachment to the private sector so that they're exposed and they can see what the outside world is like? 4, put a robust public-private partnership program to help expose these teachers to better practices. And 5, stop looking inside for ideas for teacher well-being. There's not many ideas here. Look outside the industry for great ideas to look after teacher well-being. I'm sorry, I'm so passionate, but that's my answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jaspal. Thank you again. In fact, from the conversation I got, you know, this has been ringing in my head. Stressed teachers underperform. And being an educator myself, I think I can relate. Thank you so much for shedding light on this. Thank you.
And today, don't forget, I always tell people, don't forget what we feel now in this moment, this stress. For the first time, the whole world is beginning to understand stress. Good. Let's not forget that feeling, because that's what the teachers are good.
Thank you so much. Absolutely, sir. I can't agree less. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, thank you. So to my next question, what do you think? You kind of answered it previously, but I just wanted to shed more light. What do you think is a single fundamental policy that should be in place in developing nations to set the course of a thriving education system?
The accessibility of quality education for its people lies squarely on the government. Private operators like us are not competing. We are just filling in the gaps. We are driven by the market. There is research that states 21% of children in Africa and young people are already being educated in the private sector, and this percentage is going to rise. I've read reports that says the private sector needs investments in the region of 16 to 18, not million, billion over the next 5 years, of which 1.5 to 2 billion is expected to be in the formal sector. So there's a demand. If the market demands a certain type of school, that school will pop up. In fact, many will pop up. The market will dictate the price, and competition will ensure standards. If we in the private sector don't do a good job, we pack, we shut, we go home, we lose our money. The fact is, private operators are nimble, bureaucracy free, and we are widely connected, where information flow goes down quicker, downwards to enhance and make our programs relevant. Yeah, there may be dodgy operators. Therefore, you need a clear, transparent set of rules. So a good public-private partnership program, I feel, is the single most essential policy in developing countries. And to do this, again, I think you know me enough. I just don't say something. I'm always trying to give solutions. And to do this properly, there needs to be a mindset change by certain people in governments, that the private sector is not here to replace their role. There needs to be a mind shift change that moves the private sector from being a competitor to a partner. And there are many PPP models out there to examine and emulate. For example, government could prepare the infrastructure, and organizations like us from Singapore can come and operate. There are build, operate, transfer models. There are PPP models in teacher training. Now, once there's a mind shift change, and I have advised this to local governments, to please start small. Get a few pilot projects running. Use this to tweak and to showcase this success to mayors, to town councillors, to senators, to governors. They need success stories, and let them enjoy the limelight. We are here to make an impact. And then you set the rules, the framework, the audit processes, the processes for remedy, data collection in a very transparent manner. And finally, corruption. Let me not avoid this, okay? In fact, let me tackle this rather lightly. As you mentioned, I am Jakarta's amateur stand-up comedy champion. So I got to tell a joke. So here's my short joke. They say corruption in Indonesia is under the table. They say corruption in China is on the table. But they say corruption in Africa includes the table. So, look, jokes aside, I'm a very impatient individual who look for quick intervention. Corruption is killing the system. There needs to be a mind shift change. There needs to be cultural shift change. It's killing the education system. Now, one of the best ways that I have found to handle corruption in my organization is to put in a whistle-blowing policy linked to an independent organization. You know, I'm probably the only school in this part of the world that has a whistle-blowing policy, because I take money from investors and I operate in developing countries. And this has been very effective in enhancing best practices. Now, by the way, let me finish this by saying, by the way, don't get the impression that we in the private sector are waiting to jump in every time there's a demand in developing countries. I should tell you, we're actually very wary, sometimes even hesitant to jump in, to be partners with governments. You know why? Do you know why? Because you only begin to see a decent return in education investment in third, maybe the fourth year. And that is when the elections take place. And that is when government change. So what? After we've invested, new policies, new political alignments, new rules, new people for us to bow down, there are risks for us. So what we need is a transparent, robust, clear set of rules for everyone to abide by in a very important public-private partnership. That is the fundamental policy, if you ask me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jaspal. Thank you. I just hope that government representative will one day listen to this and they will run with it. Thank you. Now to my last and final question. Having established that the role of government in education, how can they co-opt private organization, community leaders, and religious leaders to help drive the change? And what policy? The question is in two parts. What policy can government put in place to get leaders at all levels committed to improve the sector?
So I did some reading, right? First of all, this is an excellent question. I don't know whether I can hit this straight the way I always like to hit it, but let me echo what I read in a recent report by Ceres Capital. Look at the report, Ceres, C-A-E-R-U-S. Ceres or Ceres Capital. It's an investment and advisory firm that focuses on healthcare and education in emerging markets. And it says, and I absolutely agree, that governments can and must perform three key roles. The government as a steward, as an enabler, and as a partner. Now let me talk about this. As a steward, governments can and must look at the big picture and help build ecosystems for collaboration and doing business. Help with data collection to identify gaps, set standards, have big picture, have honest conversations with operators like us. Give us a voice, let us be part of policy making, and express openly what your clear agenda is without shifting goalposts every time a government changes. Encourage investments and look at opportunities up and down the pyramid. Engage. That's stewards. Governments as enablers, they have to create a conducive environment by focusing on transparent regulation, ease of investments, reduction of hidden costs, and bureaucracy. Look at profit repatriation for private investors, and even provide us avenues of funding and fair and open avenues for quick resolution if there are contractual conflicts. And as partners, governments should focus on public-private partnerships, whether it's in school management, school operations, procurement, teacher training, technology. Religious leaders, I really believe they have a big role to play. Now, moral, spiritual values are just as important as life skills like collaboration and analytical thinking. But religious leaders need to buy into the fact that education of our children is important. And you know, I attended one sermon many years ago in a village. I won't say where, but a local religious leader was giving a eulogy, and then he went into a sermon at a funeral. And he said, I've never forgotten what he said. He said, prayers will get you into heaven. Education will not. So don't worry if you have no time to go to school, but worry if you have no time to pray. So this is a very confusing statement for the young listeners. I say to you, you don't have to sacrifice prayers for education, nor vice versa. We have a problem in the education sector and we need to act. Now let me end. I'm very sorry, I'm going to be blunt, by sharing this imagery, Tunde, this imagery. Now, do you recall when the two planes crashed into the World Trade Center and we watched people tragically die on TV? You remember that horrific scene? Do you know what happened after that? We saw a nation getting up and going to war. And the whole world was embroiled in all kinds of action, good and bad. But there was action. Now look at COVID-19. Do you see those images on TV? Yetunde, people dying in hospitals, being buried in great numbers. What happened after that? Nations got up, started collaborating to get vaccine. We saw action. The problems in education is exactly the same we are facing when we talk about global warming. There are no dramatic deaths for us to shake us. Governments are not under pressure because they don't see people dying in big numbers in front of their eyes. So politicians keep talking and talking about education philosophically, and there's no concrete action. Let me ask you, do we need for people to die for governments to act? So I say to you, our citizens of our future generations will die if we don't wake up and sort the problems in education now. Because the lack of quality education, Yetunde, results in lack of jobs, results in poverty, results in crime, and poor health. Now, one of Sub-Saharan Africa's most famous sons said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So we need to act now to use that weapon. Hashtag education matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jaspal. Thank you so much. It's been an enlightening session with you. You know, some of the things that have resonated with me, the public-private collaboration data has been very huge. We thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your years of expertise, your experience with us. We're sure that, you know, this broadcast will get to a government officials one day and they'll be able to run with it. I hope that their minds will be open with this and they will do the needful. Just like you said, educator, government, do we all need to die before they take action? Like truly, should that happen? Why do they lay back? Why do they have to lay back? And I also love something that you said, philosophical discussions. Why do we always have that? Why do some set of people like to just enjoy sitting at the tables or sitting around the table just to discuss things,
you know why?
You know, that are not.
You know why? Because it makes people look smart. You speak philosophically and quietly they know they can't act. So, but they have to say something, right? So they start talking in big. So anyway, I get very tired of philosophical discussions, but go ahead. Good point.
Thank you very much. So we've come to the end of today's episode. And thank you so much, Mr. Jaspal, again for having us. All right. So till the next time. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to Teachtact. Such a great initiative. God bless all of you. Do what you all are doing. Let's go change the world. And I'm always here to help. Thank you. Have a good day.